Welcome into another episode of the All NBA podcast. I'm Saul Bookman, your new host for the next 2 days. And joining me, as always, is Legs. Tim, what's going on, buddy?
Saul, what's up, man? I'm good. Good to be on with you, man. Let's have some fun. No games to cover. Well, no real games to cover. So,
yeah,
we're going to focus a little bit on All-Star Weekend. I think we got a plan on talking about here this stretch run after this weekend, which I think everybody kind of gets an adrenaline kick and they come out of the break and they realize there's a short sprint the rest of the season getting set for the playoffs. So we're going to talk about some of the key factors headed down the stretch here into the NBA playoffs as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll get to that All-Star Weekend in a second. But as always, we're presented by DraftKings Fantasy Sports. Check out what DraftKings has to offer this season with code ALLNBA because life's more fun when you're in on the action. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. Listen, we can get right into it with All-Star Weekend. We're going to touch on the game just for a second. I know it wasn't really a game, but there was something that came out of the game afterwards that I do want to get your opinion on. But let's start with Saturday night. I thought basically the three-point contest and the Sabrina versus Curry matchup was the most appealing of the night. Outside of that, I pretty much could have done without everything else. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's too bad that, you have to be kind of critical of it or just got to be honest about what you're watching. I agree. And I've actually felt that way for a long time about the 3-point shootout. And I participated in it a couple times, so I'm not biased. I just think that it's the one thing, number one, it's the one thing that, everybody that qualifies that's asked to do wants to participate. They want that title. And it's the closest thing to replicate what you do in a game by far. And so it's really the best NBA players in the world, best shooters in the world, doing what they do and hopefully putting on a show. Now, some years, the accuracy overall wasn't great. I thought it was sensational this year. That is what the best shooters in the best league in the world are supposed to look like. So I agree with you. The 3-point shootout, that to me is what is it's the main event of the weekend. Dunk contest used to be it. Obviously, that's changed a lot. We're going to get into all of these. But no, so just as a general statement, and I know we're going to break these down individually, I would agree with you. I think the 3-point shootout is the one thing that kind of replicates what a real NBA player would be doing. You know what I mean? Yeah. Everything else is sort of this simulation that they're trying to create for fans that I just don't think really has the appeal.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The one thing I will say about the 3-point shootout, and it's probably the most obvious one, maybe you can make an argument for the dunk contest, but it's max effort, right? You got 1 minute, you got to get all your shots in, you can't lollygag, you can't take your sweet time. And that's the thing about it is it's like there's a technique to it. Which side of the rack are you going to go to shoot? Players have their preferences and things of that nature. And then the timing, when you get to that last couple racks and you only got 20 seconds, that clock starts to speed up in your internal clock. And that's what I like about the 3-point contest. There's a little bit more that goes into it than just grabbing and shooting, right? But then, let's start off at the beginning with the skills challenge. I did like the structure of it. I like the fact that they had 3 players from the same city, the host city, that were competing against 2 other groups, younger and older. I did like that format. I just felt like it was a little too long for my liking. And again, we're talking about effort. Legs and these guys are just kind of coasting, going through. They're not really like giving it their whole effort. And I'm not saying they got to, break somebody's ankles out there, but I'd like to see a little bit more effort. And I think that was the theme of the whole weekend.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's been that's been the case. Every now and then you'll get a guy that goes really hard in that, and it's just like an outlier. Everybody's kind of like, oh my god, look how hard he's going. It's crazy. Like it's a shock to the senses when someone actually busted in that drill. When you're going, especially the one where you got to go like one end of the court and the other, with the dribbling and the passing and the shooting all combined. So you're right about that. The other thing that it's kind of bothersome is like the stuff that they're being asked to do. Like I run a basketball camp every summer, get about 300 kids in my camp in South Jersey, and I've been doing it for 15 years. And we like some of those drills, like the average camper at my camp could do those.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like, I'm looking at that going, especially like the passing thing, literally. And I heard Kenny Smith alluding to it. He said basically right when they were starting out, Kenny Smith, TNT, said, if you can't put that ball through a circle that big, you should not be playing in the NBA. Like that was his very first statement he made once he sat down in his chair and he saw them roll that thing out. So, the precision behind that wasn't great. You had a couple guys that just didn't understand necessarily the track, and they had to retrace their steps because they went the wrong way around one of the imaginary defenders. But that's basic stuff. Just dribbling a couple of times, a soft crossover to get around those two cones, and then you shoot a little, like a 6-foot floater.
Yeah.
Which, and then the one thing I guess that is different is, the kids at my camp are not going to be shooting accurately from NBA 3-point distance, but they get the corner three in, and then they dribble as fast as they can the other end. They lay the ball in. Like there's nothing really there that indicates to anybody like this. These are the best athletes in the world. These are the most highly skilled basketball players in the world. Yeah. And I don't know how you change that. What you would have to do to make that happen. You'd have to add some stuff with the ball handling, passing, make the shooting a little bit more difficult. Figure out some way to do that. But I don't know that guys would want to do that. Like the whole point is they cater to the players because it's well known. They do not want to exert themselves in any capacity. And so everything gets dumbed down for them and catered to them. And as a result, it's very basic. It's kind of dragged out, drawn out. And, I think for the most part, people get a little bit bored with that. And I wasn't, I've been in the arena for it when it's done it. I've seen it live, sitting there courtside. And last few years I've been watching it on TV, and I just don't get the vibe that there's energy in the building while that's going on at all.
My buddy Espo, he used to work for the Suns, and he talked about going to the All-Star game and how in the arena, it's basically dead for the most part. You don't really feel, it's very rare that you feel a lot of excitement. That's why when you think back and look at the Aaron Gordon versus Zach LaVine dunk contest, or even Vince Carter back in the day, or even going back to the times where Craig Hodges won 3 in a row and hit 19 in a row at one point, that those rare moments are when everybody kind of gets into this. And we definitely lost out on that this time around. There wasn't really any tremendously exciting moment. I thought, to me, the most exciting moment was seeing Sabrina come out, guns blazing, 9 out of her first 10. And I was just like, man, is she going to miss anymore? So let's get to that. The Steph Curry versus Sabrina matchup. I thought that was fantastic. I really liked, first of all, I liked the fact that she did not back down. She went at him. She shot from his range or the NBA range, and she had no reservations about that because she typically shoots that range in the season. So it was nothing to her. And I thought that Kenny and Reggie made a good point. They thought that when she got through the middle, the first 3 racks, she might fatigue towards the end because she's not in season. That's kind of what happened. And then Steph, obviously, he was kind of the opposite. He kind of started off a little slow, but then he tracked towards the end. I just loved that whole matchup. I liked how enthusiastic both of them were to participate in that. And I thought it was great for the game.
I completely agree. And I didn't know what to expect, really. I didn't know what was about to happen. I knew they were both great shooters, obviously, but I just didn't know, was it going to live up? What if one of them, and it could have been Steph, and the way that she started out making 5 straight balls on the first rack, Steph's standing there watching that. They got the split screen. He's kind of looking at that. And I know he had to be feeling like, whoa, wait a second here. Like what number? Yeah. What number is she going to put up? So one of the two could have had, an off night. And if that's the case, all drama's taken out of it. As it turns out, you couldn't ask for any more drama. Steph goes to the last rack, and I believe he had to make 3 out of 5, whatever it was. And he did that to beat her, but it was a tremendous show. I think it was absolutely, think about this week really for women's basketball and what's going on with Caitlin
Yeah.
Clark
Yep.
and then what's going on with Sabrina in this contest, and the awareness and the eyeballs on the women's game, and these players like stretching the boundaries of what we've known it to be for female players. That's what they're doing. And by Sabrina, refusing to shoot from the WNBA line and say, no, if you can shoot, you can shoot. I'm going out to where you shoot from, Steph. That just empowered, I think, the next generation even more to watch that. That's what it was all about. Sabrina's comments led to that. Everything Caitlin Clark says, even after she broke the record, interviewed her, said the same thing. Her goal, her legacy is to affect as many young players in the state of Iowa as possible. And really, that's nationwide, global. That's how many people are watching what Caitlin Clark is doing right now. And Sabrina basically had that platform. That event is seen all over the world. And she had a platform for young female players of what is possible with just repetition and muscle memory and work. Yeah. And you can do that. So I thought it was sensational, and I'm glad that we got drama out of that. The last thing you want in a one-on-one shooting competition is it to be a blowout, because that defeats the entire purpose of setting up the event, right? And so they gave us that. They gave us, she gave him a run for his money. And if she didn't cool off a little bit on that fourth rack, who knows? But she did get a little, I don't know if it was fatigue or not, but everybody's going to probably hit one rack where they don't shoot particularly well. And that was it for her. And that kind of did her in. And then Steph had to capitalize on it as only Steph can. You kind of know the whole time he's going to get to the number he needs to get to win this thing. And so he took a lot of pride in it. So did she. Great part of the event, great addition to the event. There's no question they're going to build on that going forward, whether that's a different female player next year or it's, a shooting competition, like 3 versus 3, 3 girls, 3 ladies from the WNBA, 3 men from the NBA. And you have some sort of a competition, like that, where it's a total score thing. They're going to build on that because the response to it was great and they delivered.
Yeah, absolutely. The best thing about this whole thing was it didn't feel gimmicky from the start. It felt like, they didn't try to push it too much to try and make it like this Dan versus Dave thing for all you Reebok fans way back in the day. And it felt natural. And then obviously the progression of the contest itself was simple. And then, to your point, I do think that this is something they're going to build off of. I think there was a lot of positive reviews for this. I'm excited to see what happens because there's so many tremendously talented women's basketball players out there that deserve the opportunity to be able to be on a platform like this, and the WNBA has risen quite a bit over the last, half a decade, really. Women's basketball numbers have been crazy, both in the college and the pro game. So I'm excited for the growth of the sport on that side and to really be on the same level playing field as the men and be able to compete in some aspects on that level. And I'm excited about that. The dunk contest was quite the opposite. Outside of a Mac McClung, kind of, I don't know what you want to call it. He jumps over some guys' heads. He loses the ball, catches it, dunks it, which I thought was the best dunk of the night. The judges completely disagreed. That was about it. That was the only exciting part of the night. I don't know what to say about that.
No, it's unfortunately, Mac McClung by far the best dunker that they had on the floor, I felt like. And I think there's always an advantage when a guy's a little bit smaller and just visually what that looks like, and you're trying to wrap your head around his vertical, and it's just more impressive. And he does all kinds of stuff, with the ball, blind dunks and twisting his body and like all kinds of stuff. Some of the other dunks, very anticlimactic. I felt like, Jaylen Brown, it was funny. He did a dunk and then did the D Brown thing like way after the fact. Was very, very strange to me. I didn't quite understand that at all.
It's like he forgot. It's like he forgot what he was doing for a second. He dunked it. He was just like, "Oh yeah."
It's funny. Somebody, I know it was Kenny or who said it looked like he was sneezing. It was actually kind of funny, but he, whatever reason, like he started to go and just realized like he was nervous about not doing it or getting hung on the rim or what. And just kind of saw it through and then covered his eyes. It was kind of funny, but no, unfortunately, didn't have a lot. Like the jumping over people dunk has now, to me, it's worn out.
Yeah.
It is worn out. It's how many times do people jump over guys in just one competition? And it's one guy, it's Shaq, and then it's two guys, which was funny to me because Shaq is 7'1", and then they put two guys on top of each other, but they bent their knees down. So I don't even think they were 7'1" at that point. So you had two guys that were shorter than Shaq, but it was like, oh, wow, it's two guys. But it's not even as high as Shaq. So what difference does it make? You know what I mean? If you put 8 3-year-olds stacked up on top of each other, that would be 8 people, but they're not as high as Shaq. So, listen, it's I don't know if it did it for some people. And again, it was weird. It was really strange this year. Look, and I've been in there as well. Like I said, I've not only been there as a participant, but that's a long time ago, 96, 97. I remember the electricity in the building for the dunk contest and the three-point shootout. Now, the year I won the three-point shootout, the dunk contest was won by Brent Berry. And he jumped from the foul line with his warm-up still on and legitimately a foul line dunk. And I just remember the place erupting. And then 97, I lost to Steve Kerr in the finals. The dunk contest was won by Kobe Bryant. And I remember the show that he put on that year and the electricity in the building. And the next day at the game was anticlimactic for me. It was the first one I had been to in person. And I got to go because I was participating for the weekend. I felt pretty good about myself walking in the arena that night, having been the 3-point winner. That was pretty cool. But the game I was like, wow, this isn't what I grew up watching. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying it has to be like that, but you go back and just pull up ESPN Classic and look at an All-Star game from the 80s. Mm. And it's like dudes are banging, forearms in the back in the post and like hard contests and going to the rim and getting fouled and guys going to the line a little bit. And that's what I remembered. And so sitting there live in 96, I was like, wow, man, this is really like, wow. It was like, Matador, like nobody's getting hit at all. And think about that. That's 28 years ago. Yeah. And each year has gotten more. It's trending more in that direction. So think about how far we are now from what it used to be. And, the dunk contest created so much buzz in the building. Nobody could wait, right, to get to that moment. And I don't know about you, but like watching it on TV, I was like, are they muting the crowd on purpose? Yeah. Like for television watchers, because I literally couldn't hear any cheering. And obviously there had to be some cheering going on, but if it was just very subdued, I think it goes to show you about the lack of excitement that it was creating. So Mac McClung was the best. Hey, at least the guy that was the best dunker won. That worked out the right way. I think that was justice. He had the best dunks, and he should be, a repeat champion. It's just, odd a little bit that he's not in the league. Hopefully he can get into the league. I'm pulling for him.
Yeah, I think there's a twofold problem with the dunk contest right now. One, you don't have big enough names in it. Listen, back in the day, that was one of the big differences, Tim. Like we had Jordan versus Dominique. You know what I mean? Like you had the big dogs that were going up against each other. Even as recently as Aaron Gordon versus Zach LaVine. At first, you might not have, they weren't on the same level as Jordan and Dominique. Don't get me wrong, but when they started, then you were like, oh, these two dudes came to play. Like, and the electricity in that building after that first set of dunks was unmatched, except for Vince Carter in 2001. And that's to me, that's one of the bigger problems. Because if you go to the dunk contest and you see a Ja Morant go out there, you're immediately like, okay, let's see what he's gonna do. You got a little Riz in you, and I just didn't feel like that's one of the things that's missing. And the other thing is, if you're not going to go that direction, you might as well go ahead and lean into the total. If there's a dunk contest somewhere in the world, you get some guys that that's all they do. That's all they know how to do. That's all they want to do. They can come in and put on a show, and then you could judge them off of that. I just don't, getting these guys that some people don't know about to compete in this. It just, unless their dunks are out of this world, it's just never going to track for me. And to go to your point about the game itself and the things that have changed, I think this quote from Anthony Edwards kind of tells it like it is. He says, for me, it's an all-star game, so I don't think I will ever look at it like being super competitive. It's always fun. I don't know what they can do to make it more competitive. It's always fun. It's a break. I don't think nobody wants to come here and compete. And Legs, I understand that these guys are multi-million-dollar athletes, but the competitive spirit of that comment is probably what saddens me the most. And, and I remember playing against my son, who's now 18, but at the time he was about 15 or 16. We were playing at the park, and it was the first time he ever got a chance to play against me. And, and I was giving him the business. And he called me a tryhard. And I was just like, oh, what? I'm trying hard to beat your ass. I don't know what other way to go about doing this, right? And that's, to me, I don't know if it's a mentality shift from generation to generation, but clearly there's been a disconnect in competitive, spirit. And that, to me, is the most disappointing thing about what I saw on Sunday.
Yeah, and I think, look, Anthony Edwards is a young player, so it's a particular generation. I think that is kind of embedded in their heads from the time they are 14, 15, making their way onto the AAU circuit at a high level, becoming nationally ranked players, and then climbing their way up over the next few years before they go do their one and done. That's just what they've been watching. They've been watching this for how many years? Look like this. So. Yeah. You would think like a guy finally gets there and, the adrenaline of that and, but obviously you can't be the only one doing it. So that's kind of the approach. The approach now is, and Steph actually made some comments about it too. Steph said that basically it's kind of like, guys are just kind of, it's a grind. It's a long weekend. It's a long season. Other guys are getting a week off basically, to, if they're not involved, to go take a trip, refresh their body, see their families, whatever it may be. And the demands on their time over the weekend is so much that there's just not much left to give by the time you get to Sunday. And you know what? There's probably a lot of truth in that. So my question then, I guess, is if this is what it's going to look like, and I'll be honest with you, I've been saying for a while, Saul, that this game is strictly for kids that want to see all those dunks, right? And the deep threes, and it's, for a little kid. I'm telling you, if you're a kid, like a 10, 12-year-old kid, and you're a serious basketball player, that like you're playing on your travel team or you're playing on an AAU team, whatever it may be, like you really love the game. Not even saying you got to be a great player, but you're super into it, and you're on a team and you're practicing every day doing it. That's not even entertaining to them.
Yeah.
Because it's not real. Nothing about it looks real. It's just, and it's boring. It's actually, even aside from the lack of physicality, it's the monotony.
Yes.
It's monotonous. It's 48 hours. Every trip looks the same. You know what I mean? Nothing's different about it. And I just had an idea real quick before we wrap this up, thinking about the dunk contest. And I was thinking, like, if this is how it's going to be and none of the star players are going to do it, it's almost like you'd be better off the NBA compiling the best X amount of dunks from the season and playing those dunks on the big screen and let the fans decide. I mean, because that way you're going to have star players in there, and you're going to have star players dunking on dudes which you're never going to see in a dunk contest, and you're going to have them going as hard as they can, and it's going to be a lot of the guys that are in the All-Star game and then some other guys, and let the audience at home vote, like however you'd have to do that, because then at least you're voting on what real dunks look like, because what it's turned into with no stars doing it, a lack of familiarity with some of these guys. You got a guy in the G League doing it. You either do what you said, which is literally have a tryout, recruit the best dunkers from all over the world and put them out there, and none of them are in the league or like whatever it may be, or you do what I said. And let the crowd say, just a compilation of eye candy, best 20 dunks of the season, do a fan vote, you get it down to 4 or whatever. And then and then you show like another round or something of those same guys, whatever it may be. But, and I'm obviously half tongue in cheek with this, but I'm just saying that's kind of what people are craving.
Yeah.
The excitement, the electricity of a star player throwing it down on somebody, like, that gets you out of your seat when you're watching the game. And that element's not going to exist. And until you get the big stars to participate and create real buzz, not just one, like Jaylen Brown, like 4 guys, all of whom, not necessarily all-stars, but like definitely guys we all are familiar with, all-star caliber type players. Until you do that, I think you're going to have more of the same. But the game, I don't know if we're very close to, I don't know if they pull the plug on the game. Like, I don't know what you do about that. 211 points. I mean, I just don't know. I don't know who that's entertaining to.
Yeah, they're in a tough spot. The NBA is, because you can't get rid of it, because it's a huge revenue driver.
Sure.
It just is. So they're not going to get rid of it that way. But at the same time, how are you going to convince these players to really care about a game that really doesn't mean anything outside of your reputation, and that's about it. So it's unfortunate. Hopefully they can figure out a way to do it. They've tinkered with this thing so many different times and come up with the Elam ending and all this other stuff, and none of it is really tracked. Even the first year of the Elam ending, you saw a little bit of growth and you saw a little bit more competitiveness, and then the next year it was right back to where it was before, because they were like, whatever. Even throwing in a charity element to it didn't motivate these guys enough to play at a high level, and it's unfortunate. But the NBA regular season is coming back, and the competitiveness is also coming back. So let's go to our next ad read, because you're going to want to get your tickets as well at Game Time. By going to Game Time, you can get your tickets at a discounted cost. I'll use promo code ALLNBA, and you're going to be able to you save yourself about $20 on the very first purchase of tickets that you have. Make sure that you go to Game Time, download the Game Time app by using promo code ALLNBA. And terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code ALLNBA, spell it all out, and then download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And you might as well go ahead and place your bets on the DraftKings Sportsbook app while you do that, because DraftKings is the very best sportsbook out there to be able to place your bets. To me, you got some pretty good odds out there. I think right now to win the Western Conference, I think it's the Suns are at a plus 800, and I think the Nuggets and Clippers are right there at the top at a plus 120 and a plus 150 respectively. To me, any one of those three teams is probably a good bet. Probably the first two are the best in terms of the Clippers and Nuggets right now as we speak. But I have a feeling that my Suns are going to try to pull through and get close again. So make sure you go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app by downloading the DraftKings Sportsbook app with code ALLNBA. All new customers can bet just $5 on the NBA and get $200 instantly in bonus bets, only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code ALLNBA. The crown is yours. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 878-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boo Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus, age 21 or over, varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/basketball for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. All right. That's a lot to say. Legs, let's get to the second half of the season, the thing that everybody really is most interested in talking about for sure. I'm excited because I think we have a lot of teams, especially in the West, that are all bunched up. 1 through 8 is as thick as it's ever been before. And I think this last stretch of games is going to be something that we're all going to remember for quite a time, because it's going to be very competitive. You have, the Suns have been surging of late. You have other teams, the Heat in the East have seemed to put it together to a certain degree as well. Like, teams are starting to rise up and try to make their moves. And as we get to the second part of the season, we wanted to kind of point out 5 names, players or coaches, that we think are going to make the biggest impact, or we're going to be watching the most in the second half of the season. So, Legs, I will let you start it off. Who is the first person you'd like to bring up?
All right, cool. We'll go this way. So we'll rotate back and forth. And if I say one that you have on your list, then just go ahead and comment and tag what I say, and vice versa. So we'll start out. I'm going to start with somebody in the Eastern Conference. I think this one is going to be very, very interesting. So we're talking about, like, the spotlight is on, and a lot of attention is going to be paid because they're going to have a lot to say ultimately about what happens in these stretch runs and these playoff races. And the first one for me is Doc Rivers. I'm going to start with Doc, and for obvious reasons. All right, so he comes in. It's tough. I've said before, it's tough being a player, getting traded during the season, walking into a new locker room, new group of teammates. They've got their protocol established in September, and you walk in. And it's very tough for a player to be comfortable and have an impact. It's hard. It takes time, certainly a consistent impact. Yeah. It's significantly harder for a coach. you coming in and like they have a system in place. They've got play sets, play calls, a rotation established and whether they were happy with it or not, they're 30-13, I think, at the time. So, they're winning a lot of games, a lot's established. They decide Adrian Griffin's not the right guy. Here comes Doc. So, you can't judge him certainly based on what's happened, but clearly they hit rock bottom the other night against Memphis. Memphis had a shell of their top talent on the floor. All those guys were on the bench watching. You would think practically conceding the game. And the Bucks come in there with everybody and they lose to Memphis. And that's rock bottom right now in this short stretch with Doc and probably for their season. So the question is going to be, now that he gets a week and he gets to go and maybe have some more time to get with his staff and implement. Now he doesn't have his players there for the most part. You come out of break though, you've had more time to analyze what you inherited, what's good, what isn't, what needs to change, what's the rotational changes you need to make, whether the schematic changes, particularly defensively. How do you squeeze the most efficiency out of Giannis and Lillard pairing offensively, right? All these things are on his plate. And Doc, he's going to have to get to work and make this happen quickly, because right now, a lot of people are thinking the Bucks aren't looking like a contender, despite the fact they've got two of the best players in the NBA on their team. And they went into the season clearly as a contender. And I don't think I saw any list that didn't have them in the top two in the Eastern Conference. It was Boston and Milwaukee going into the season. That's what we all expected. And right now, with Embiid's injury and with the way the Bucks have played, teams like the Knicks and Cavaliers are getting all kinds of light. And they're trying to jump up and grab that void in the 2-3 spot. And the Bucks are fighting for their lives. And this is a lot for Doc Rivers to try to figure out and assess. And he is going to not be judged by what he's done so far, but he is definitely going to be judged going forward the rest of the year to see if he can get the Bucks in rhythm, put together a winning streak where they're playing well on both ends. And then if he can do that, if they win 5-6 games in a row, again, you beat a couple good teams in there, I'm telling you, all of a sudden, everybody's going to jump right back on and say, okay, that's a contending team because of their top talent. But they're a long way from that right now. So Doc's got his hands full, and that's why he was my first choice.
Yeah, I agree. And that was also one of my choices as well. I think taking these players from the known to the unknown is going to be key for Doc Rivers, because, he's got some things that I'm sure he likes in his own system, and he's got to find a way to see how much of that can be implemented with this team in a short amount of time. It's a very, very difficult task. I'm definitely conceding that. But we're going to see how good of a coach Doc Rivers is, and really, I think more importantly, how good of a manager he is in terms of being able to manage not only the players that he has, but also fitting him into a system that he was unfamiliar with until he got here, and how, listen, it takes a little while to understand what your players like to do the most, right? You can watch it on tape all you want, but then you hear things behind the scenes. You talk to Giannis off the court, and you start to learn more about your players. And then you want to accentuate that on the court to put them in the best position. And I think that is a very, very difficult thing to do midway through the season. Zero time to talk to these guys. You just show up and, okay, let's run it. And it's damn near impossible. But because of their talent, I think that will stem the tide, at least to a degree, you hope. 3-7 in their last 10 is not great, but I don't expect that to continue just based off of their talent alone. I think here in the next month, we'll start to see some growth from that team, and they'll start to, move towards that top echelon, organization that they had been for the last 5 years. And maybe we get to the playoffs and we're looking at Bucks and Celtics all over again as the top two teams. I would expect that to happen, mostly because I know the Knicks improved quite a bit and the Cavs were making a run, but until I see it in the playoffs, I'm not going to believe it. And that's kind of the way I go. When these guys, the Celtics and Bucks have been battle tested. Philadelphia, no idea if they're going to get Embiid back. It's going to be a little tough sledding without him. So I think they're still in a pretty good position to kind of make their way. The second person I'll bring up is Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal's on my list of the top 5 players I'm going to look out for, and mostly because of this. I think, everybody saw the quote unquote big three, and they thought, this might be one of the best offensive teams in the NBA. And when he's on the court, they're right up there. They're a top 5 offense in the league. They're as good as anybody out there. But the problem has been obviously the injuries have caught up for him time to time. He got injured with the hamstring before the All-Star break, and he's expected to come back here soon. They are number one in their number one scoring lineup is with him in it. Okay, and you have Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and then you have Grayson Allen and Nurkic alongside. That's their number one scoring lineup that they put out there, and it scores at a high clip. I think it's a top 3 overall offense when he's out there. Turnover percentage, one of the best in the league as well. It's low. It's below 10%. That's what you want to see because Brad Beal helps alleviate that pressure from Devin Booker. But the thing I have not seen with Brad Beal, except for on about 2 or 3 occasions, is his aggressiveness in attacking relentlessly. And I think there's been times where he's gotten a little too passive and he's deferred. I thought towards the end, before he got that hamstring injured, I thought he was starting to figure it out and starting to be like, okay, I know when I can be aggressive. I don't need to keep deferring to Book or KD. I'm as good as those guys, and I can score at an elite level just like them. So let me be a little bit more aggressive. And that's when they started to click. But unfortunately, he got hurt. So he's the primary one on this Suns team that I'm going to be keeping an eye out for because I think he's going to have the most impact in terms of their ceiling as anybody else in the league on any team.
I completely agree. I'll tag that real quick. I didn't have him on my list, but I love this one because I think he is the guy that's most vulnerable and probably the most questions about. Like, I mean, Durant's dealt with his share of injuries too here now over the recent memory, and Booker's had some. But you feel like Bradley Beal has really dealt with some stuff. And that hamstring, I agree with you. Like, he came back and he was like, you could just tell he was afraid to test it. And I've dealt with that injury. And you just never quite go full throttle because you're so afraid. Because it can feel absolutely great, but you're like, I'm not really going as hard as I can. And I don't want to ever feel that again. And so, you don't get there. The efficiency with the 3 of them is what we've been waiting to see. Can they be so good offensively that it doesn't matter if maybe they're an average defensive team? Can they be so good on the other end that you just can't possibly cover all your bases with those 3 players? You're talking about 3 guys that can ball screen operate. They can catch, spot up and shoot it. If they're spaced off one of those guys, they can all isolate you. They can all get to the hole. So you've got multi-platforms of scoring from 3 different guys at an elite level. Most firepower of any top 3 in the league. So I agree with you. Bradley Beal's the guy that could be stirring the whole thing. And if he stays healthy, that might be the Phoenix Suns might be a team we're looking at here, a month from now and saying, wow, man, who's going to beat that team? That's possible. My next guy, I go back to the East. I'm going to go with Julius Randle. I look at the Knicks and, they were already becoming this hot story prior to Randle's injury. They acquire OG Anunoby. They just don't miss a beat, man. He's a perfect fit for them, much better than RJ Barrett. So they got that one right. And then the injuries hit them right before the break. And it wasn't just Randle's. They had to feel like everybody was hurt. Mitchell Robinson was still out. Dante DiVincenzo, who was absolutely unconscious for the last, 6-8 games, he gets hurt right before the break, misses that game against Orlando. Brunson's out there by himself trying to do it. They lose. You bring in a couple guys too, Bogdanovich and Burks. They have really just gotten their feet barely wet with this group. So now coming out of the break, you're going to get Randle back here, whether it's right after the break or shortly after, whenever that's going to be. And then finally you get to incorporate Bogdanovich, Burks, and Anunoby with Randle for an extended period of time alongside Brunson. And that's a team that is so deep and has so many other additional guys to score now. You figure they're going to be relevant. They're going to be a team that can make a serious run in the East. And it comes down for me to Julius Randle providing consistent production alongside what you're going to get out of Jalen Brunson and not having a series where he really struggles to make his jump shot or, they're taking the ball out of his hands and he's just not getting to his number. He's had moments like that in the postseason. He needs to rise above that. And even with all this added depth and talent, it's great that they got more options. The bottom line is you got 2 guys that are going to win their matchups physically, and they're going to be the guys that generate that offense, and it's Brunson and Randle. So, and I think I know what I'm getting out of Jalen Brunson now. He's a known commodity. I have no doubt. He loves that stage. He loves that light. Julius Randle has to play big in the biggest moments down the stretch in the regular season for seeding, and then, of course, once you get into the playoff series.
I feel like every great player has either a move or a spot on the floor that they feel like when they are struggling, they can go to try and get back on track. And Julius, from time to time, forgets that. And his inconsistency shows in those moments. It's like he tries to be a little bit more perimeter based than he is down low, and from time to time he kind of loses himself within these games when things start to go awry. And I totally agree. He is definitely. He has the most potential to really raise that organization to an Eastern Conference championship or even get into the NBA Finals. But man, when it starts to go south for him, he really does have a significant impact on that team, and that is probably the one for them that is the most interesting to watch. For me, the next one, I think we both got this guy on our list in the Western Conference, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. SGA has an opportunity to. He's already in the MVP conversation. He is the number one player in terms of points per attempt in the league for anybody that has a usage rate of over 30%. He's unbelievable in terms of shots per attempt. Overall, this OKC team, very, very good. But there's a lot of question marks about how they're. Listen, when you get to the playoffs, it's a different animal. And this team has not gotten there yet. They got a great defensive team. They cause havoc like nobody else in the league. I think they have the highest turnover percentage on defense of anybody in the league. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the reason why. He's a jack of all trades. He can do them all at an elite level. I'm very interested to see how he elevates his game as we get closer to the playoffs. If he's in the MVP race towards the end of the season, how he pushes for that. And more importantly, where does his game go when we get to the first round? I want to see that growth and that development because we've never seen a player like him in the playoffs yet. I'm interested. That's the most interesting I've been in terms of a team. I've watched OKC, throughout times this season. They're one of my favorite teams to watch on the side outside of the Suns. I really am a big fan of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I just don't know when the rubber meets the road in the playoffs how they're going to respond and how they're going to react because it is a different beast for sure.
Completely agree. Love the Thunder. Shai's on my list as well. And you alluded to all the things that he does. There's a very young core group. They haven't gone through a playoff run together. They've done no winning as a team in the postseason. They don't know what that looks like yet. They're going to get into that spot. And whether that's right now, they're a 2 seed, a game and a half back, but you got Clippers and Nuggets right on their heels. I mean, so you're talking a game and a half out of 4, game and a half from 1. That's how tight they are at the top. And ultimately, I think he's one of the top 5 hardest covers in the league individually, or even from a team schematic standpoint, trying to stop a guy because he's so good with the ball. He's got an incredible start-stop ability that makes it really difficult defensively to keep him contained. And then he's got a stop on a dime, pull-up mid-range that is just as lightning quick from stop to release as anybody you're going to see. It's outrageous, and it's his go-to. He can get it off anytime he wants because it's impossible to time it right as a defender. And he's going to shoot that prior to that second line of defense or prior to a trap. That's why the luxury of those guys that have those lethal mid-range shots that they can get off whenever they want. It's a critical part of winning in the postseason because teams are going to come up with traps and schemes and ways to get the ball to your hands. And this can be something you can utilize before that action takes place. So you can still stay included in the offense. So this is all that he brings to the table. But here's to your point and mine, why we think this guy is so spotlight worthy. Look at what the West might present. You could be a 2 seed if you're Oklahoma City, and you're going to play potentially, if it started right now today, they're going to play a red hot Dallas Mavericks team who looks like they got some stuff figured out with Luka and Kyrie. Kyrie's back right now looking joyous, and we know he goes through stretches where he's super invigorated and he's unstoppable. And then, something happens, he gets a little disinterested for a stretch, whatever. Who knows what these last 25 games hold for him. But right now he is rolling. And then they went out and they got better. I think they got significantly better. They added Daniel Gafford is a guy that can give them at all times now, along with Lively, a big bouncy guy in the middle that can defend the rim and run and get lobs from Luka. I thought it was just a really important acquisition. And I think PJ Washington in this situation is a better fit than Grant Williams. Grant Williams was just not having the impact. I think PJ Washington is more versatile. He's going to eat up those minutes. So they got deeper and better, and Kyrie is rolling. I look at the Mavericks as a really scary team. So what if you're Oklahoma City and that's who you get in the first round? Well, you know what that's going to mean? It means that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, they can't win that series unless he is the best player in that series.
Yes.
And you're talking about 2 of the best players in the league. So that's the level to which he would have to take it. Like, he can't just be good and their team be good. If he gets outplayed by Kyrie and Luka, it's a wrap. So that's the pressure that's on him because it's not a normal 2 seed to get a team like that. You could also, by the way, end up with the Lakers in that spot. You can end up with the Pelicans in that spot who have playoff experience together. So it's a gauntlet for these top teams that haven't won together. Minnesota, Oklahoma City come to mind, to play teams like that. It's almost not fair because that's what the West looks like. It's topsy-turvy. It's upside down. And that's why Shea is so critical. He's going to have to deliver against a top flight talent and top flight team potentially right off the bat. Series 1, you're going to have to bring it and be the best player in that series. And that's why I think he is so critical.
Yeah, absolutely. 1,000%. The other thing about Shea before you move on to your next guy is his stride and his length is also the separator between him and other guards in the league because he can get his shot off just about at any point in time. I love his versatility, as you pointed out. But Lex, who else do you got?
Next guy for me, I just talked about him a little bit, is Kyrie Irving. I'm going with Kyrie because, and he's proving it right now. When Kyrie Irving is engaged and super interested in what's going on, he is as good an offensive talent as we have in this league. And he's proven it now. And he's in like that super comfortable lane, right? Which is next to the center of gravity, next to the center of the universe, like he was in Cleveland originally. Won a championship in that lane. Went to Boston and they asked him to be a leader with some young talent up and coming. And he didn't want really a part of that. He's like, wait a second now. I just want a ball. And problem is those guys were so young, they needed him to elevate, and he didn't really have a taste for that. Then he went to Brooklyn, and we know what happened there. That was a complete disaster, dumpster fire from the beginning with chemistry and with injuries. So now he's Dallas, and guess what? He's back in that same lane he was in when he was in Cleveland originally. And he's very comfortable there because he doesn't have to answer all the questions all the time. He doesn't have to be the guy that sets the plate for anybody. Just go play next to this guy and go be you. And you're going to get plenty of opportunities because Luka gives it up. Go be you and be spectacular. And they've got 2 guys doing that. And right now that's what they look like. And that's why I think they can be scary, but he has to stay invigorated, engaged, interested, and like ready for a 2-month run, which has been a problem for him a little bit. So that's why I think he's so critical because I think he's that good.
Oh, he's the most dynamic guard in the league when he's locked in, for sure. 1,000,000%. I just his overall game, I would say pound for pound, is better than anybody else in the league when he's locked in. I mean, from the and every single level, at the rim, mid range, 3, doesn't matter. He's damn near unguardable. And again, that balance between him and Luka has been interesting to watch over the course of the last year. And in the playoffs, again, we haven't seen those two in the playoffs. And I don't know how that's going to work when things starting to tighten up. You get to a half court battle, and how does the ball movement work out for those two? It's going to be very interesting. His counterpart, LeBron, back in Cleveland, is who I'm going to talk about next, because LeBron to me is the one that I'm looking at. Listen, he's coming. He's almost 40. And he's playing out of his mind for his age, and he's still one of the best players of all time, still one of the best players in the league as we speak right now. And the Lakers are in a very interesting position. They've won 7 out of their last 7 out. They're 7-2 in their last 9, and they've been putting it together. They've been playing pretty good ball. They're sitting right now in the 9 seed. They're trying to make their way up, and they're going to have to, because I don't think that they can afford to do the play-in again this season, because that's just too taxing for them to try and do that and then follow it up with a 1 or a 2 seed that they would have to face in that first round. That's tough sledding. They did it last year. They got to the Nuggets. More props to them, but I don't feel like they are in that position this year. I think the loss of Jared Vanderbilt is going to really rear its ugly head once they get to the playoffs. I thought defensively he was kind of that do-it-all defensive guy. He does a lot of the dirty work. Now that they don't have him for the rest of the season, that's going to hurt them. But they are good enough with just him and AD alone to be able to carry the torch to the playoffs. I just don't know if they're going to be able to find that finish line. And then what does LeBron do after that? Is he going to want to stay in LA? He's got an opt-in for about $51.2 million after this season. Is he going to stick around? Is he going to go? We'll get to that point when we get to that point. But LeBron is the one that I'm going to watch the most, because I want to see how he responds coming down the stretch of this season, because typically around this time of the year, he turns it on and he takes that team to another level. I just don't know if everybody else is going to be able to match that level, because Austin Reeves has struggled this year. He hasn't played that great compared to last year. He was a big reason why they had so much success in the playoffs. He came up big time and time again. Who's going to be that guy this year? I don't know if they have a third guy that's going to be able to do that.
I like LeBron as well, and I agree with you what you said about the Lakers. This is a different animal you're dealing with in the Western Conference than last year. They got a Warriors team that in the second round, that first of all needed a 50-point game in Game 7 to even win their first round series, and then you get the Warriors team, and basically they were physically swallowed up by the Lakers defensively. The length, the size, the physicality of the athleticism. The Warriors were a small team, and this was coming off the year before. They had bigger wings. They were smaller, and they were thrown around in that series. And they bottled Clay up. He struggled really badly. He kind of set the table really for this entire season for Clay, was that series, how hard a time he had getting going. And it just was like watching it. You just were like, man, they can't. It just doesn't look like. It's almost like when you go see an AAU tournament and you get one of those elite teams and like their first round game is against this team, and you're just like, they're so much smaller. And you're like, how in the world are they going to keep this team off the glass or deal with them? Like, that's what it looked like against Golden State. And so then you end up, and then you get to the Nuggets, the champs, and you get swept. So, and that was to get to the conference final, then it gets swept. This is different. Like, look at the top of the West. You're not going to do that. Now, look, you could potentially get some teams like Minnesota, Oklahoma City, like I just mentioned, inexperienced, young, maybe to be a little bit of that all factor, with some guys playing them, but you're not going to physically overwhelm these teams at the top. The Clippers would be in that category. Denver, Phoenix with the talent they have. It's not going to happen. So I think for me, I know you can never rule out LeBron James and Anthony Davis, but it's a little bit of a reach for me to think they can become a real contender. But LeBron would be a great guy to put the spotlight on, because if they're going to do it, it's going to be off of him.
They would need that. They need that third person. They need that third person to step up. Without that, they're done. I agree.
I completely agree. My last one is a little bit interesting. It goes back to the East. And again, this is going to be very dependent on time frame. What could be the one like fly in the ointment in the Eastern Conference? Joel Embiid.
Oh,
Joel Embiid. All right. So, and I don't know, man, it might get too late and they might say, we can't bring him back with, whatever, 5 games left in the regular season. And just, they'd be too scared. Let's just get to the offseason, let this thing heal. I don't know though. It said 6 to 8 weeks. So, if it's 6 weeks, that's, getting closer to that like late March area and early April, and you start playoffs mid-April. Who knows where they'll be at that point, because they're not the same team. Are they in a play-in situation? Like, where are they? And look, I might be completely off base. They might just send him home for the year. They haven't said that. If he were to come back with a decent amount of games left to try to get himself into shape, just think
how many?
I would have to say he's got to play probably 8 games.
Okay.
And he's such a differentiating factor, because there's only one Joel Embiid, and they have him. And they just added Buddy Hield, who would be a perfect complement with Maxey and him. Okay, so I just think that's an interesting one. I just want to put him on there. I might be completely off base, because they might have already made up their mind internally, like he's not playing this year. So I just think it's interesting to have a guy that good, who I think was going to win the MVP, kind of just sitting off to the side right now. No one's talking about him while his team's a little bit of a free fall. And then all of a sudden he comes back at the end of the year, and what that would look like, and having to play those teams at the top, it'd be interesting.
Yeah, no, I that's a great point. I love that. I agree with that totally. Joel Embiid can listen. He's one of the best centers in the game. There's only 2 elite centers in this game to me, and that's Jokic and him. I think Joel Embiid coming back, I would tend to agree. I think 10 games is probably the mark I would point to, because you got to get that. You got to make sure, first of all, that you have confidence in that knee on that court. That's probably the most important one, and then the conditioning. I think those 2 things. If he doesn't have that, they're probably going to hang it up for the rest of the season. But I hope he comes back. I really do, because I think the Eastern Conference is going to be it's going to be far more fun to watch if he's back than if it was just the Celtics and the Bucks, basically at this point. For me, I'm going to the Celtics. Joe Mazzulla. I think if you're going to talk about Doc Rivers and the pressure that's on
Yeah.
him midseason, I think Joe Mazzulla has the same kind of pressure, if not more, based on year one and the success that they had, but how they faltered at the end of the year against the Heat. And going in, listen, if the Bucks are struggling the way they are, you are clear and far away the best team in the East. You've got to play like it, and you've got to get to the finals, and more importantly, you got to win the finals. And that's the pressure on the Celtics right now. Joe Mazzulla, I felt like I'm not going to say that the moment was too big for him in the Eastern Conference Finals, but I felt like it might have been a little overwhelming for him in that moment. And I'm interested to see what he learned from that experience, what he's going to take towards this year, and how the Celtics grow and learn from that moment, which I listen, it's not all on him. I think Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have just as much to do with this as anybody. But as the head coach, you know the responsibility is going to fall on you. And I definitely think that Joe Mazzulla has a little bit to prove in not only the NBA circles, but also in his hometown in Boston, to make sure that they understand that he is a proven winner. He can get this job done. And, after he replaced the former coach, I'm forgetting his name, over in Houston, I think I'm more interested to see what he's going to do for this team when they get into those pressure moments down the stretch. And if they should match up with Milwaukee, that's going to be one interesting series. The dynamics between him and Doc, and then these players and those players, very interesting.
I like it. I thought last year, look, it's a tough spot, man. Ime Udoka is basically removed right before the season.
There you go.
And so you're taking over a team on the fly. It's not your team. And you got to, he had a whole season and he had a lot of talent. I mean, that's nice to have that kind of talent, but there's also a spotlight on you when you get to late in the year and in important moments. And I thought there were some issues, late games situations, with the stuff that they went to. And he's very, very young and going through it for the first time. He's probably learned exponentially from that. And he's got the best team talent-wise in the NBA. So you look at what their starting lineup looks like, the bench contributors, you got four major weapons, five, if you count Derek White, five in your starting lineup. I mean, he's got a great team. He's got guys that play both ends of the floor pretty much across the board in their starting lineup. And he's got a year of experience. So I think that's fair. I think, that could be something that we're going to be looking at. They're going to be in tight games at some point that matter, like series defining big moments. It's 2-1 series and it's, 2 minutes to go. It's tie game. Like these are the kind of moments that sway series. And so we're going to be definitely watching him and scrutinizing it. And I think he's going to be more prepared, more equipped this time around.
Yeah. Every time each person or coach we've talked about, I keep thinking of their team and their, and how they're orchestrated and they're constructed. I keep going back to, I mentioned with LeBron and the Lakers, the third person, right? I have a hunch that as we get to the end of the season, when we see whoever wins the NBA championship, it's going to be who is that third person that played the best on that championship level team. Last year was Aaron Gordon, I thought was dominant. When he played against the Suns, they didn't have anybody that could stop him. He just bullied them to death. And I thought, along with Jamal Murray and Jokic, he was just as good, in being that third person. When you're looking at the Celtics, can he step up to that challenge? Can he be that third guy that they can go to? And just so much out there. Very excited. Before we go, Tim, I do want to ask you, give me one team in the East and one team in the West that you're looking for in terms of, what they're going to do in the second part of the season.
I think I got, and this is a different question because this is not necessarily who's going to contend or whatever.
Yeah.
So this is just interesting to me, interesting teams, okay, that to keep an eye on and could be making some storylines. I think, and for me in the East, it's Indiana. First of all, the Pacers have been interesting to me all year, and they are only 2.5 games out of the 4 spot. And more importantly, have had a very limited time with Pascal Siakam and Tyrese Halliburton, because they got Siakam at a time when Halliburton went through some injuries, and they haven't played much together. And I thought Siakam's the perfect complement to him. He fits their pace and style perfectly. The way he's got a high motor, you don't have to run plays for him. He just creates stuff out of nothing. He's their second best offense creator immediately the day he stepped on the court. They also just added some other pieces that Doug McDermott's going to get a lot of Buddy Hield minutes. He's trying to kind of find his way. I just think their pace and style are really tough to deal with in a regular season. Nobody really plays quite like that. And so you could see them potentially now when they get their team healthy and playing more games together. Do they close that gap in the 4 spot? And before you know it, maybe they're hosting a first round playoff series. And again, now dangerous because it's a very difficult style to prepare for. And then in the West, it's the Warriors, man. The way they've been playing lately, I know that we want to pull that sheet over them, but I'm just not ready to do it, man. I'm just not ready to do it. You know what I mean? I'm like, I still got the sheet there, like kind of taking a peek, because they're playing better. There's something different with the juice they've had here lately. Now, part of it is Klay Thompson's played a little bit better, and they brought him off the bench right before the break. He had his best game of the year. Let's see if that continues. Does he continue to embrace that? Is that something that's effective for them? Podziemski gives them the luxury of doing that because how well he has played as a rookie, and they put him in the starting lineup. I think it gives him more versatility with their passing. He's a better creator. The ball hops really good. And you're not just focused on getting Klay going every night. I think that's been something in the beginning of the game. It's like it's a separate storyline and narrative unto itself, and it's distracting. This way, he can sit there for a little bit, feel out the game, come in, and I always call those first 6 minutes dead weight anyway. Guys just go up and down the floor. Everybody takes a shot. Then they all shake hands. Okay, we ready to play now? Okay, let's go. It's a waste. Bring him in. Every minute he plays is meat now. It's meaty minutes. Come on in and get your thing going right away. That's what you're supposed to do. When you start the game, it's harder to get a guy going like that that's been struggling. Kuminga's been great for a long stretch now. He's arrived. He's legitimately every night now. On a bad night, giving you 15. On a good night, 25. Like, that's where he's at, giving them an energy and that bounce. Draymond Green has played great since he came back from the suspension. I don't know if people are noticing what he is doing, but he is absolutely affecting both ends once again. And then you still have Steph Curry at the top of his game. So I just think the Warriors, they won 8 out of 10. They had won 5 or 6 in a row before that last loss. But now you have a team that I think is interesting. And right now they sit there, they're 10. They are, 4 games from 7, 5 games from 6. I don't know they're going to catch those teams, but I do think if they continue to play well the rest of the way and stay healthy, that's going to be a very interesting team to have to get in a play-in tournament and potentially get into a best of 7 in the first round with one of those top teams.
Yeah, I agree with you to a certain extent. I do have doubts about whether the Warriors can hold up in a 7-game series against some physical teams. If they match up against the Nuggets again, that's going to be a little bit of a problem for them. But yes, the Warriors they're squeezing every last drop of the legacy juice right now as we speak, and they're trying to get it all out. I totally get it. For me, Minnesota has been the best team in basketball for a majority of the year. Ant has been playing out of his mind. Rudy Gobert's figured it out over there. They have a good, solid team. But again, just like with OKC, what are they going to do when they get to the playoffs? Last year, they had the Lakers on the ropes and then blew it, and they went home. So I want to see how Minnesota responds in the playoffs, how they elevate their play, because they when they're locked in, they're as good as anybody else as well. Miami is the other one in the East to me. Miami, again, just like the Warriors, you just don't know if they're going to be able to put it all together and find their way down. Their defense has been outstanding the last couple weeks. I think they were like the third-ranked defense in the league this last stretch as they went 5-2. They're starting to get their pieces together. Jimmy Butler is going to have a large impact on this as we go down the stretch because he always seems to raise his play as we get closer and closer to the playoffs. But those two teams for me are the ones to keep an eye out. So
I like it. Miami especially because they Minnesota. Yeah, you're right. I mean, now it's okay. You're there. You've been there all year. You got to deliver. The best home record in the Western Conference. Number 1 seed's important. If you hold on to that, you got the best home record in the conference. Then you got to deliver on that. And look, they're great defensively, so I think it gives them a chance every night. Even when they don't shoot well, they have an advantage because they can defend you and keep it to a 98, 96 game if they have to. On a night where they don't play particularly well, but they're focused on them. And in Miami, just because it's Miami, I think Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the NBA, and it's hard for me to imagine that they're not to be heard from at some point. We're going to hear from them. They're going to win 6 straight at some point in the second half here, and everybody's going to pick their ears up and say, "Oh, here come the Heat," with another improbable run. And look, with everything they got, all those vets and that coach. That would be a hell of a series if you ended up with the Miami Heat in the first round and you're one of the top seeds.
Yeah, when you're talking about Minnesota, good to go back real quick. If the playoffs were to start today, they would play the winner. Assuming they got past the first round, they would play the winner of the Nuggets and Suns. You talk about a second round matchup that probably nobody wants for sure, that team. But Legs, man, I had fun first round with you, man. I really appreciate it.
Enjoyed it, man. It's with no games, which obviously we do a lot on this show. We had a lot to talk about over the weekend, and looking forward down the stretch. So I think it was a good show. Thanks
for sure.
Appreciate being on here.
Absolutely, man. Well, hey, thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you hit that like button on the way out. Really appreciate you all in the chat. You guys are killing it all episode long. Until tomorrow at 11:30, we'll be back with Legs, myself. Peace.
All silly like the mayor.